Good morning. Let me be the first to welcome you to the Oliver Creek Church of Christ. My name is Garrett Best, and I'm one of the ministers here, and we are so thankful that you've chosen to worship with us online today. Oliver Creek is a special church. It's a special church serving the Bartlett area and the greater Memphis area. God has brought this family together in order to glorify Him through our worship and praise and through our lives, in order to love one another and serve one another as a church family, so that then we can be empowered to go out into the world and bless the world. At Oliver Creek, worship and studying the Bible and the Christian life isn't just one of the things that we do. It encompasses our entire lives. At Oliver Creek, what we do is we seek to be transformed into the image of Jesus Christ. If you're visiting with us, please reach out and let us know that you're worshiping with us today. We'd love to hear from you. If you're looking for a church that you can plug into so that you can yourself be transformed into the image of Christ, we would love to talk to you about how we can minister and serve to you. Thank you so much for worshiping with us today. I encourage you, stand up and sing with us, pray with us, study the scriptures with us, and be prepared to take the Lord's Supper at home with us. What a privilege and an honor it is to worship our God and to do it together. Thank you, and God bless.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near, and my time has come, still my soul will sing your praise unending, 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, worship His holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul, I worship your holy name. Worship your holy name. I worship your holy name. The splendor of the King, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, all the earth rejoice. He wraps Himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. It trembles at His voice, trembles at His voice. How great is our God! Sing with me, how great is our God! And all will see how great is our God. And age to age
Yep.
He stands,
You're basically going to flunk out.
and time is in.
All right, we're going to go through the prayer list. I'm going to just assume that everybody in the room and online is familiar with all the regulars on our prayer list, because most of these folks are kind of perennial on here. I want to just update you on a few things. Sunday, Fred Cooper was in the hospital. He's now at home, and he's just taking IV medications for his MRSA and the issue with his foot. And then Betty Cowan requests prayers for her friend's 4-year-old daughter that's recovering from her 3rd heart surgery. Betty Overly is Tim Overly's mother. We've been praying for a heart issue that's been resolved, and she's going to have gallbladder removed on Tuesday. And then Mary Lou Shannon's brother, Eddie Yarbrough, is having some health issues and is going to be starting dialysis. Todd, would you turn off the lights in a second when we finish the prayer? In terms of announcements, there's a blood drive this Sunday. You can sign up out there in the lobby or contact Bill Lee. We need cookies for Vacation Bible School. Original and golden double stuffed Oreos can be dropped off in the kitchen. Vacation Bible School is July 17th to the 20th. We need all Explorers Club detectives to bring their kits to help us solve the mystery of Christ. Register using the link in the weekly email, and if the kids register before July 3rd, they'll receive a special clue in the mail. There will be some VBS work nights, Thursday, June 23rd from 6 to 8, and Tuesday, July 5th from 6 to 8. Stop by and help prepare for this fun event. There will be all kinds of work to do, and it will be a great time to get to know other members. The last announcement's a little weird for me to be making. Send off for the Best Family will be Sunday, June 26th after second service worship. There will be a scrapbook, and you're invited to type a letter to the Best Family, sharing memories, the impact they've had on you, or OC, encouragement, etc. Get your letters to the office by Wednesday, June 22nd. There'll be a money tree. Give cash to Dawn or Todd Strickland, and you can make checks payable to Oliver Creek, add Best Family to the memo, or you could give online gifts, include Best Family in the comments. Monetary gifts to be included on the tree must be received by 12 o'clock on Friday, June 24th. All right, that's enough of that. Yeah. Minimum of $100 is just what they said. I'm just reading what's on here. I'm just kidding. Moving's expensive. I think that's all that I have. We'll say a prayer we'll say a prayer right now. Let's pray. God, we thank you for this time we have to be together tonight, and we just pray that everyone stays safe during this just extreme heat wave, and we pray that you would just watch over everyone that's a member of this church. We're so thankful for this special church family that we have, and we ask a blessing on the elders and ministers and deacons, and we just pray for our upcoming Vacation Bible School that our kids would be drawn closer to serving Jesus and learn more about the mystery of Christ. We pray for all those we mentioned tonight that are sick and dealing with cancers and struggling after the loss of loved ones. We just pray that you would bless them. We thank you so much for your Son, and it's in the power of His resurrection that we walk every day, and it's in the Spirit who is outpoured that we live, and we seek every day to keep in step with. And so we ask your blessing as we seek to do that in our lives. We pray that our study tonight of all these incredible sites that are there for us to visit in Turkey would be something that would uplift our faith and encourage us. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amy, would you turn off the lights, please? Or there's Todd. Sorry, I didn't see him. Thanks. All right, what we're going to do tonight, because this is going to be my last Wednesday to teach. We're out of town next Wednesday, and Dennis is going to fill in. He had told me before this class began that if needed a fill-in, he had done a presentation on Rome, so it's not exactly Turkey, but it's over there. It's a different place, so he's going to do that the next Wednesday. So what I'm going to do is we looked at Ephesus and Pergamum, and so I'm a Revelation guy, and in terms of Revelation, Ephesus and Pergamum were the two best places, hands down. Like nothing else we're going to see kind of holds a candle to those two. So we looked at the two biggest, most surveyed, most excavated, coolest places in depth. And so tonight I want you to see the other 5. And so then you can say I saw all 7 of the cities in Asia Minor that are addressed in the book of Revelation. So I don't know if you remember this, but in the very first class, we looked at this reference in Colossians where although Paul is writing to the church in Colossae, he says, I testify for him that he's worked hard for you and for those in Laodicea and Hierapolis. Now, Laodicea, as you'll remember, is one of the 7 churches in Revelation. Luke, the beloved physician, and Demas greet you. Give my greetings to the brothers and sisters in Laodicea. Now look, he's writing to the brothers and sisters in Colossae, and what's he telling them to do? Give greetings to Laodicea and to Nympha and the church in her house. And when this letter has been read among you, have it read also in the church of the Laodiceans, and see that you also read the letter from Laodicea. When we read this earlier, what does this imply about Colossae, Hierapolis, and Laodicea? They're close to each other. They're sharing. Greet those people when you see them, with the implication being it's inevitable you're going to see them soon. When this letter gets to you, share it with them. Read their letter. There's this closeness here. And so I showed you this map a couple of weeks ago, and here's Laodicea right here, and Colossae is down here. It's just 10 miles away. And Hierapolis is up here, and it's just 8.4 miles away. And the landscape is such that when you're standing here at Laodicea, you can see Hierapolis and you can see Colossae, even though they're 8 to 10 miles away from there. These cities are really close to each other, and people are always passing in between these cities and kind of sharing and being together. I mentioned this picture the very first class, and here it is. This is me standing on this platform in Laodicea. And what I did was I looked over and I took a picture of Hierapolis, and then I'm going to turn and take a picture of Colossae where you can see this. Now, in this picture, do you see the white thing right here? It would be helpful if it wasn't kind of an overcast, cloudy day, but you can still see the white thing. What I'm going to show you in a little bit when we look at Hierapolis is that's not snow, that's salt. So I'm going to show you what you're looking at. But remember, you're seeing this, it is 8.4 miles away. And you can see it from here. So this is me looking to the left. Now I turn over here and I look in a triangular, and it's not exactly visible, but the Colossae Hill is somewhere over here, and I'm going to show that to you. So you just look from one way to the other. The other thing to notice is how beautiful the mountains are in the background. This is a really beautiful place to live, and from Laodicea you can see both places 8 miles away and 10 miles away. So here are those cities. Let me show you Colossae. You ready? It's pretty incredible. Here it is. Nothing. There's been no excavation work done here, nothing. This is what's called a tell. It's an archaeological term for just a mound of dirt, that if we were to explore that tell and dig down, there's no telling what would be under that tell. And so basically, we're standing on top of just, Colossae is here, and there really is just no telling what's underneath that, and they have not done excavations. I think I might have mentioned in the first class that the Turkish government has not just been keen on let's read the Christian Bible and determine sites that would be important to Christians and fund the digs there. And so what has happened is people like Mark Fairchild and Mark Wilson, who the books that I've been using and referencing, Mark Wilson was the one on the documentary that we watched. I shared that other documentary on our Facebook page on Amazon Prime, The Last Apostle, with Mark Fairchild. They actually have been meeting with like high up government officials, and they do seminars, and they're basically saying, if you would just dig here, you would have tons of tourism, get tons of money. And even if you are a Muslim, money talks. And so this is Colossae. We actually pulled up to this, and again, this is what happens when you look at other sites. Like, okay, when we looked at Ephesus, right? When we looked at Pergamum, and you saw how incredibly excavated and all those things, this is what it looks like before you start that process, which I hope you then have an appreciation for what archaeologists do. It's really incredible what they do. Underneath here is a major ancient Roman city, Colossae, that nothing has been dug. However, plans are underway to excavate it. This has been announced February 3rd, 2022. They've actually already done the site survey, which is they have all this special equipment where they're taking radar pictures down in the ground. So they've actually surveyed the whole site, and then the archaeologists go in and begin digging based on the survey that they've done. And so the survey's already been done, and this is going to be beginning to be excavated maybe within the next year. So this is a super exciting development. You don't know what you will see. This is why if you go to any Bible place, you have to go back. You can't just go once, because you go and you come back and stuff is changing every time you go. So that was Colossae, and now I want to show you Laodicea, because they have done a lot of archaeological work at Laodicea. It is really well preserved, and it's one of the larger sites in Turkey, kind of after Ephesus and Pergamum, but there's just a lot of stuff here. This is kind of looking out. Ooh, this is kind of just looking out over this area. Yeah.
Was all of that dirt above that look just like that other hill that you saw?
It would have looked something like that.
Do they stand those back up?
Oh, these are definitely stood back up. I mean, so they dig under that dirt, and what they're going to do is find a whole bunch of this. And then they're going to be able to figure out how those pieces are to be put back together. So, yes. One of the questions that came up at the 1 o'clock class, I just want to point out, is you notice the different kinds of stone. So you notice the white marble, and then you notice this stone. This is one of the ways you can date certain sites and certain materials. These older stones that are just kind of made from more like local rocks at a rock quarry would be dated to the Hellenistic period. And so Hellenistic period, we're talking about 3rd, 2nd, 1st century BC, after Alexander the Great. That's Hellenistic period. And then the marble, they're actually bringing this marble in like extreme distances. This is Greco-Roman. You got to have the best, the finest, the marble. That's why rich people get their name on it, because if you pay to bring this marble in and have it stood up, you get your name written on the column. But this is one of the things you can do kind of to date, is tell what's the older, what's the newer. And like, resourceful people, they usually don't waste stuff. So they'll find a way to reuse those older rocks, bricks that were used in the Hellenistic period. When you're walking around the road, you can still see the divots from the chariot wheels. So there's just incredible detail in these places. This will be marble. Mm-hmm. This is at Laodicea. What does this look like? It's a theater. And it's carved, it's just inside the side of the hill. You're asking, Colossae is just a hill. This has not been excavated. So this is just kind of what it looks like. Which, this is kind of impressive because you can just look at it and it's not completely under the dirt. You can still tell, well, it is. And so they don't have a ton of work to do when they go in here. But again, hazy day, you could imagine, not in winter when there's trees and there's stuff growing down there, how beautiful it would have been to sit in this theater. The other thing to mention is because they've carved it out of the side of the hill here, the acoustics are so good. I mean, when Jesus is doing the Sermon on the Mount, he's doing it on a hill because he's on a mount, because the acoustics are good. And so how do you talk to a whole lot of people? Well, you do it on a mountainside where the acoustics are really good. They don't have microphones, and there's 8,000 people seated in here. And so if you build it well enough, the acoustics are pretty incredible in these places. You see this right here? If we dug right here, you would find kind of the platform of the stage. And this theater is, you can tell by the rock that this is a Hellenistic theater. It's not a Roman theater because it's that older looking rock. And so on the other side of Laodicea is another theater. This is one of the few cities that has two theaters. I honestly forget the difference. Can you notice a difference in the rock here? This would be a Roman theater, and it faces the complete opposite direction. And so if I were just guessing, it has to do something with whether you want to have your show when the sun is rising or setting, or the views and the time of year. I mean, Like, they're just as addicted to media as we are. They just have to go to the theater to see it. But this is, look how small. And then look at the mountains in the back. It's a really beautiful, beautiful sight.
Were there two poles?
Over here?
No, at
Over
the
here?
bottom.
Oh, down here?
Right there.
Yeah.
Is that where, like, the king?
The head honcho sits.
Yeah.
Yeah. The head honcho sits there for the show. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then here is, you remember when I pointed out if we dug right there, there'd be a stage on that other theater. You can kind of tell where there's something, but it would be like this. This is Mark Wilson that you saw in the documentary. We just stopped and saw this interesting thing. So the only two places in kind of the world that you can go and actually see just first century stuff and nothing else is Pompeii and Vesuvius, Herculaneum. Because when Vesuvius blew in 79 AD, it froze those cities in time. So every single thing that you're seeing is exactly like it was in 79 AD. So those two cities are extremely important for reading the New Testament, because everything you see is just first century. When you're at any other site that's there ever, people continue to live there. 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, 5th century, 6th century, 7th century, 8th century. So you're almost looking at nothing that's exactly like it was. There's continued use. They tear down buildings and use those stones to build new things, and so there's just a lot of continued stuff. And the Roman Empire changed a lot in years to come, where, remember, Turkey becomes kind of the center of Christianity, where Constantinople's the center, and so there's lots of just Christian symbolism like this. You see clearly a pretty neat looking cross graffitied on this pillar. But Mark was just showing this to the group and saying, this is the kind of nerdy stuff that archaeologists and scholars do. So what do you notice right here? What does that look like? Menorah. So somebody has, and when you look at the cross and you look at the menorah, which one do you think is older? Why would you say that?
Because it's 200 years before the New Testament.
Yep, there's still Jewish populations here for centuries.
It's worn down. The cross is clear.
Yeah. So I would say the menorah looks more etched, like more informal, and then somebody later on comes and puts the more decorative, the more formal looking cross. You see that? Like, it's less likely that you have a cross and somebody comes and sticks a menorah underneath it. So a scholar would say some Christian has come along later and put this cross on the menorah. Well, then the question becomes, all early Christians are Jews. Christianity grows out of Judaism. So is this a positive message saying, like, we are connected to our Jewish brothers and Jesus grows out of Judaism? Or is this kind of an anti-Semitic, or is this kind of a negative sign, like, menorah, no, Jesus, the cross? And these are the kinds of things that a scholar would come and write in a whole article about, is how to understand the interpretation of this graffiti, this Christian art. And so it's fun. It's just interesting to think about these kinds of things. And when you're looking at this, somebody in the 4th, 5th, 6th century came along and did this, and it's just trying to imagine why they did this and for what purpose and what was going on in Laodicea all those thousands of years ago. This is a church. This is a church. Now, anytime you're going to see a church like this, it has to come after Constantine, because they're not going to be able to build buildings until after Christianity is legalized. And then it's even going to be further out than that, because Constantine just legalizes it. Theodosius is the one that actually makes it the official religion of the empire. So you're never going to have a massive church like this until after Theodosius. So all these kinds of churches are going to post-date they're going to come after the 5th century and later. But this is a massive church. When you go into it, look at the handmade marble floors. It's really a massive, massive building. I didn't have a picture of it. I should have, but kind of, right over here in the middle would be where they read the Word of God. So it's kind of a pulpit there in the middle that everybody kind of congregates around. This is where the elders sit. And I don't know if y'all remember weeks ago when we looked at where the tomb of St. John is in Ephesus. There was that big church that was built there, and there was that area where the elders would sit. And so I suggest that we make this for the elders here on the stage, and they sit and face out, and they're taking notes of who's falling asleep and that sort of thing. So the elders sit here. Here's a baptistry, and they were incredibly efficient in their baptisms. So you notice stairs here. So you line, and you walk through, and you dip, and you come out. And so in a lot of these bigger churches, like not every city has a big church like this, and so people come from all over, and so you need to be efficient in your baptisms so that you can baptize a large number of people who come different times of the year. Some of these baptistries would also have, like, I'm not sure what this would have been, but sometimes maybe like where this was, there might have been a font for oil, and you get anointed when you come out, things like that. So this is a probably 5th to 6th century Christian church in Laodicea. What?
For the baptistry, how did they put water there?
Let's talk about water in a second. We'll get there. Yeah, we'll talk about water in a second.
So they were dunking people?
Yeah, they were immersing. Yep. Here is Hierapolis. Okay, remember the salt? So we just saw Laodicea. Remember the salt you could see? This is it. Isn't that crazy? This is from minerals from hot spring water coming up out of the ground, and it's kind of just slowly working its way down. It's this massive salt deposit over there. I mean, these are people. Look how big this is. It just goes all the way down the mountain. I had a nerdy touristy shot of me. You can see the steam because it was cold that day, and reach down and touch. I mean, this is hot water. I had a hot tub growing up, and this is in the 90 degrees. It's hot water that is coming up out of the earth here. Oh, this was our 5-star hotel. I've never stayed at a 5-star hotel. But you could, in your room, they had a faucet that was linked into the hot springs. So in your bathtub in your own room, you can run the mineral water from the hot tub. But outside, so they had the warm pool. It was not cold, a warm pool indoors, and then outside over here, you went outside and they had the water. This is actually like a metal structure, and they're running the water over it, and it's naturally making those colors. Like it's all the minerals within it. It's creating this like rock thing. And I think if you could read that, I think it says 104 degrees is how hot this water was that they're naturally putting in this thing. It felt amazing because it was like really cold outside. It was like in the 30 degrees, and it was raining. So cold rain is hitting you while you're in. It was really nice in here. So in the background here, Maggie, is this statement to Laodicea, right? So remember where we started. Laodicea, they're going to Hierapolis all the time. Hierapolis is coming to them. I know your works, you're neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were either hot or cold. Because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth, right? If you live in Laodicea, you know something about hot water. What did you notice on the mountaintops in the pictures? Snow. You also know about cool spring water that comes down. And just like in the ancient world, just like today, one of the ways I've heard this passage mistaught is a lot of preachers will say, we've got a lot of people that are really cold and we all need to be hot for Jesus. But that's not what this says. In this letter, hot and cold are good, right? You want to either be really cold or really hot. Those are both good. So notice, he says, you're neither hot nor cold. I wish that you were either hot or cold. Hot and cold is really good. When it is 97, feels like 107 outside and you're sweating to death, what do you want? Cold water. When it's winter outside, what do you want? You want to get in that hot thermal bath, or you want hot coffee or hot tea, right? So hot and cold both have their uses. Nobody ever has use for lukewarm water. You don't want to drink it, you don't want to bathe in it, and so even today we understand this imagery, but my point is if you live in Laodicea, all these people are going over and getting in the hot bath in the wintertime. They're vacationing over in Hierapolis and getting in the mineral bath. They know about this. I do need to say, though, Maggie, that maybe none of you have heard this. No one at the 1 o'clock had heard this. I definitely know I've heard this growing up. There's this kind of illustration that gets used a lot about this passage, that they were actually bringing water from Hierapolis over to Laodicea, and by the time the hot water made it over to Laodicea, it had turned lukewarm. I know I've heard that. I don't know if anybody else has heard that. That's not true. That is not the water source. They're not bringing water all the way from 8 miles away over to Laodicea. That all these places, they're actually in what's called the Lycus River Valley, and there's lots of springs there, and there's the river, and they have their own water systems. We're actually going to see in Sardis, we already saw it in Ephesus, these people are super advanced, and they have running water throughout their cities. They're diverting the water and running them in such a way that they have running water in their homes. Not every single person has running water, but a lot of people have running water in their homes and in their buildings. We're going to see actually some of that in a second. But my point is just, if you live in this area, you know a lot about cold water and hot water. And you've got the Lycus River, you've got the springs coming off the melting snow on the mountains, and you've got the hot springs in Hierapolis. And so this kind of a teaching would have been real understandable to folks. This is continuing on in Hierapolis. This is a really well-preserved theater in Hierapolis. And so, again, I wish that it wasn't cloudy, because you could see in the background are mountains back here. I mean, ancients knew how to have a view. You can also see here that when they had their shows, there's multiple doors that they can come in and out of. There's a side door right here. There's doors. They could be underneath here. And so if they needed to pop up through the floor or kind of come out for the shows, like, they were good at theater, and had similar kinds of theater things like we do today. You can also kind of look out and just see how massive this is. Miles, it's just the circumference of it is miles. And you look at the state of this. Like, this is all needs work, needs work to be reconstructed. Here's a better view of that stage.
Are these places treated like national parks?
Yes. Yeah, they've got security guards there, and they're publicly funded with bathrooms and gift shops and that kind of thing. Yep. Okay, this is pretty cool. So going back to, we're still at Hierapolis. Going back to the 2nd century AD, there were strong connections that that at Hierapolis, this is where Philip the Apostle had died. There's some confusion because it was Philip the Apostle, and some talked about Philip, whose 4 daughters were prophetesses in the book of Acts. But nonetheless, we have like written evidence that there was a tomb in Hierapolis for Philip the Apostle, and it was not discovered until 2011. And so this is a pretty recent discovery, that this is the tomb of Philip, and there was an inscription here that mentioned Philip, and so this was regarded as the tomb of Philip. Now, as I just mentioned, there's a lot of debate about which Philip this is. And remember, I made a comment a couple weeks ago, Everett Hufford agreed, so it must be right, that I think with traditions like this, it's like there's too much smoke for there not to be a fire. You don't build a monument like this. You don't have pilgrims traveling all over and build a church unless there's something to, probably underneath here or in here, Philip, whether that was Philip, one of the 12, or Philip, the guy in Acts who had 4 daughters who was a prophetess, that there was some Philip, that this is actually the traditional site of the burial. So this is what it looks like on the inside, and I think there's something to this. I think the argument is that we're at Philip with the 4 daughters who are prophetesses, it wouldn't have had as much prominence of a site as it did. So that I think more people lean towards this being one of the tomb of one of the 12. What ends up happening in the ancient churches, there's kind of a rivalry, because Rome says, we are the place where Paul and Peter died, and Asia Minor responds and says, we are the place where John and Philip died. And so there's kind of like a who can have the most burials of the apostles kind of thing going on in the church. And so this is, and again, recent discovery, 11 years ago, were digging, and this is it. This is the site of that. And they knew there were strong connections because just up the hill from this is a massive church. That's the Church of Philip. This is where people would, just like, remember there was the Church of St. John at Ephesus? This is the Church of Philip where people would travel to. When you're looking at this, imagine these columns go up and they make a massive dome. This would have been a massive church with a dome. Here's a symbol, so a cross, and then you see this thing right here. The letter of the Greek alphabet that's an R looks like a P in English. So this is Christos, X and then R. And then right here is Alpha and Omega. So Christos, the Alpha and Omega. There's all kinds of symbols like this in the site. This is just a diagram of how huge this church would have been. So down here is where the tomb is. You go and visit his tomb, and then you kind of pilgrimage up to, and there would have been a baptistry in here, and you would have gone here to be baptized. Anyway, that's a really neat thing here in Hierapolis. I only mention this, I didn't get to see this, but I just mention it because these are the kinds of things. This is a tomb of a guy named Flavius Zeuxis, and he's not important other than the fact that he died in the 1st century. So this is somebody that's living during the time of the 1st century when Revelation's written. And right here on the door frame of his tomb is an inscription saying, as a merchant, he traveled to Rome 72 times on voyages. This is just a merchant dude who lives in Hierapolis who's traveling to Rome 72 times on ship to sell his textile goods. And if you do the math on how many years he lived, he's traveling to Rome twice a year, all the way from Hierapolis. This just kind of tells you, whenever you read Paul's letters and he's like, thank you for sending so-and-so to me, people are traveling all the time. And when you read Paul having a shipwreck and stuff, I mean, it's just every year for some of these people. In Revelation 18, 11 through 13, when John is just absolutely spearing the Roman Empire, one of the things that he's spearing them for is they're just what I'm going to call exploitative commercialism, where the Roman Empire is just going all over, and it lists 26 goods that they have commerce, and they're going over and getting those goods. And it's basically saying, like, the last thing that's being traded is the buying and selling of human souls. In Revelation 18:13, it's one of the critiques of slavery in the Bible. The buying and selling and trafficking of human souls. And it lists slavery along with cinnamon and spices and goods, and it's critiquing that. And this is just a guy who puts some legs on that critique to kind of show you that right here in a city like Hierapolis, which isn't a major city, that you have merchants that are just traveling all the time, selling goods like like Lydia of Thyatira does as well, that they're traveling. Just a small little nerdy thing, probably would have not meant anything, but we can always turn something into something interesting, right? All right, here's Philadelphia. Philadelphia, there's nothing here. This is it. And I know I said nothing. This is like a 6th century church that was built here. You can tell it would have been a massive church, a really big church is what's left of it. But in terms of like Bible, ancient city of Philadelphia, Revelation, this is all that's there is the city square, which brings up a major issue when we're talking about any sites, is that people continue to live there, and there are modern cities built on these places. This is the main city square, and this is all that you could see if you wanted to see something from the ancient Roman city of Philadelphia. There's just nothing to see. Now, what you will see in these city squares, do you notice, like, we just got a big pot sitting in a tire here, right? And we've got just stuff kind of laying around right here. What ends up happening in these little city squares like this is a farmer will be out plowing in the field, and he'll hit something, and he'll dig it up, and it'll be this inscriptional stela or something, and he doesn't know what to do with it, so he just brings it up here and plops it in the city square. And so in these little city squares, you just have all these ancient artifacts There'll be little, I think I have some little bone boxes of folks that you just walk around and there's all these random things that farmers have brought over or people have just kind of come across, and they've been, it's unfortunate because if you were to just walk around and find something significant at one of these sites, you'd really never know where it came from. You'd never know the site to go dig and find more or whatever that might be. So these little places can be kind of cool, and there are these large modern cities built on it, but underneath there's no telling what's underneath there. This is one of the major issues I mentioned at the 1 o'clock class in a place like Israel, because you want so badly to dig there, there's just no telling what's underneath. But there's the modern city of Israel built on top, and it is just a powder keg of political strife, because you have Jewish communities, and then you have Palestinian communities, and then you have Muslim communities, and so you're not going to be able to go and say, hey, we're going to tear your houses down to dig. You're just never going to be able to do that. So unfortunately, there's just no telling what would be under the ground there. And it's the same here, that there's just no telling what this is, and it's just sitting under some houses. There's no telling what we would find. So that was Philadelphia. There's nothing to see there. Sardis, there's two cool things in Sardis. This is walking down the Royal Road, and this is somebody's house. So we're looking at houses to move into, and we're kind of being picky, like we need at least 2,500 square feet. Well, this is somebody's house right here. So not very big. What is this? Based on where we've been so far, can you tell what this is? Anybody? Latrine. You see the toilet seats? You've seen those before. And remember, Maggie, they have running water right here in your feet. So if you need to do your own washing up, there's running water. And then they've got the bigger thing with the running water to wash away your poo here. So as you're going down the main road, here's a public bathroom for people to stop in and go down. Yeah. Maggie, to answer your question, the clay pipes are still in the walls. They have running water. And so what they would do, I couldn't even explain to you how our running water works. I don't understand it. But in these cities, what they would do is elevation is your friend. And so you start the aqueducts higher up, and then the water just naturally kind of flows through. But they have clay pipes in their walls. Not everybody's got personal running water in their house, but certainly the wealthy people would have. The main buildings would have had running water. We saw this in Ephesus when we looked at the rich houses there. The other thing I wanted to point out is this has been reconstructed, and so these bricks right here are like reconstruction bricks to just build back the structure. But you notice what's down here, way down. What does this mean that all this is on this, and these are two different kinds of stone? What do you think? Different era. So this would probably be something like Roman era. If you notice the kind of marble looking, this would probably be a 1st century kind of thing. And then this building, which we're going to see in a second, it's like a 6th century Jewish synagogue, is constructed on top of that. When you go to Capernaum today, we know Jesus went to the synagogue in Capernaum. When you go to Capernaum, there is this black basalt base at the synagogue at Capernaum. And on top of it is clearly rock that doesn't match the black basalt base. And the rock is from a later period, like 2nd or 3rd century AD synagogue. And so what you're looking at when you're at the synagogue in Capernaum is not the synagogue Jesus would have gone to, but that black basalt base is probably the base of the synagogue Jesus would have been in. Does that make sense? So you can tell by the different rocks and the different materials being used. So this is the synagogue. This is a 6th century AD. So 600 AD, a Jewish community here. The synagogue can hold, for one service, can hold over 1,000 people. So there's a massive Jewish community here in Asia Minor. This is the foyer this is the foyer. That was a fancy word. This is where you get your water, drink your water, wash up before you go in. Massive. They've had to shell out a lot of money to put these nice coverings on there to keep the sun from damaging the mosaics on the floor. It's really beautiful. This is the inside. inside of the synagogue. 1,000 people can stand inside of here. It's really incredible.
Where's it put the women?
I don't know that. I guess they're all in there. I don't know. Here is somebody scratched a menorah. Just kind of look for these kinds of things. They're evidence of Jewish communities. I saw this one. This is my picture. And I found this one online to show you what the sun will do if you don't cover it. And so the sun will destroy some of this stuff. Now, this is a 6th century AD synagogue. But the reason I have this up here is the person who contributed, I don't know if it's just the mosaic or this area, but the person who gave money to build this, his name is Aurelius, and there's his last name. And he describes himself as a God-fearer. This is the term in the book of Acts that Luke uses to describe a non-Jew who is interested in Judaism. And so Cornelius is a famous God-fearer in the book of Acts. They're Gentiles who are not Jewish converts, but they're interested in Judaism. So here is one of them. His name's Aurelius, and he describes himself as a God-fearer who has donated money to build this section of the synagogue. Just interesting. Even 600 years later, there's similar things going on that we see in the New Testament. I only reference this, of course, that synagogue postdates the New Testament by 600 years, postdates Revelation by over 500 years, but this is an issue. There is a large Jewish community in this area that believers in Jesus are kind of running into and having some conflict with, even in the New Testament, and those Jewish communities persisted on for hundreds of years in this area. Do you remember when we were in Ephesus, the major temple is the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the world? But remember how exciting it was when we actually got to see the Temple of Artemis? There was nothing to see. You remember that? There was that one column and that was it. And so thankfully, here in Sardis is the most well-preserved temple to Artemis in Turkey. And so I just want to show you how incredible this temple is. This is making your way up to the temple, but we also kind of hiked up here so we could get a shot looking down, and this is it. It's incredible. These columns are massive. Look, that's a person. You see how huge the columns were? And you notice right here, they're just a bunch of rocks on the ground. These are reconstructed. And so this is what archaeologists do, is they'll build the rest of these up. Remember, the temple to Artemis in Ephesus, there were 127 columns that made up that temple.
Did Samson push the columns?
Yes, Samson pushed the columns over. Look at how big these were. I mean, these are people. They're just massive. And now you get a sense of how they constructed them. So they bring them. Do you see these holes right here? They bring them kind of strung up on these holes. They have to transport this marble in. It's not from here, so they're bringing it from long distances. And it's cut into segments, and there's like a dowel in the center of them, and they're kind of just stacking them on top of there, lifting up, stacking them, and then they finish them so it looks like a whole column on there. This is interesting. See the writing right here? They had a sense of humor in the ancient world. They would write on the column instructions for what to do with them in the first person. So a lot of columns will say, "Finish me," and that's instructions to the local builders on what to do here. This one was really funny. I have it in my notes on the PowerPoint and I can't see it, but it basically says, my booty was the first one to be here, and I was the first column to be erected in this site. So the column is bragging about my base was the first one to be here, and I was the first one to be erected. So it's just, they kind of had a sense of humor even in their architecture here. Right next to these columns down here is a church. So this would have been built in the 5th, 6th century. It's a small church. We got to laughing in the 1 o'clock class because you can see this was the original. Then they must have had growth because here's the annex. So for some reason they had to expand. I guess they had a few folks showing up to church by the Artemis Temple. This is Thyatira, and this is it. Like, this is all there is to see. It's that city center type thing. And this is all obviously reconstructed as well right here.
Is the white part?
Reconstructed. It's probably plaster. Yeah. And this is what they start with. It's real incredible what they do. Okay, Smyrna is the last city, massive city. Izmir is the modern city, so Smyrna. You can see how the modern city is related to it. You got a massive city built over this, and there's still a few impressive things here, but if you could look under these buildings, there would just be so much there. This is it. Do you notice on the picture, see these just big old piles? This is what archaeologists start with. It's right here. And then they build and reconstruct these columns here. Sometimes you get kind of lucky, like some temples sometimes are pictured on coins and stuff. There was a guy named Strabo in the 2nd century who would travel around and do really detailed descriptions of these things. And so through Strabo, there were 127 columns in the Artemis Temple. So there's some really helpful things like that. But no, I mean, you're looking and you're matching. And I don't understand the science of archaeology, but it really is incredible. This was just a random inscription sitting here, and it's just a reminder what's going on. It's praising Democharis, who helped after a mortal disaster of an earthquake, helped rebuild the city of Smyrna again. So we don't know what he did, but just a reminder, there's always earthquakes, and that's why all these things are just laying in pieces on the ground. This is, do you remember on the video when I lamented? You remember I said there's that building and we didn't get to go in it, and there's those inscriptions? This is why you, as a scholar, want to go to Smyrna, and what you actually want to see as a Christian is down there under lock and key, and we didn't get to go. But here's one we did get to see. See the boat? There's all these thousands of inscriptions down there. This is me, very sadly, behind a fence, just taking a picture of a place that I really wanted to go that we got to see on the documentary. You got to see them go behind there and into this area. One of the earliest Christian graffitis is here. I think I'll mention it in a minute. It's the word Lord and the word faith are both equal the number 800. And so since those are equal, the only proper way to respond to the Lord is with faith. That's just some Christian, 2nd, 3rd century AD, scratched that graffiti into the wall. But there's also...
Why would they let you go back there?
I assume you have to have an official person from the site go back there so you don't mess up the walls. They're trying to keep people from messing up these sites. In Revelation, you got the number of... Anyone who has wisdom, calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a person. So we're always looking for, oh no, my Coke can has 666 on it. 666 is the number of a person. And ancient people in these graffitis, these are graffitis I would have loved to have gone back there and spent hours trying to find. Look, do you notice where these are? Smyrna. And I just chose a few. They're from this website, ancientgraffiti.org. I love a woman whose number is 616. I love a woman whose number is 1308. There's many of these back there. This is just something ancient people knew how to do. And the Greek name Neron Caesar in Hebrew letters comes to the value of 666. Now the reason we know that the reference is to Nero is that if you right now pull open your Bible, there's likely a note in your Bible that refers to, it'll say something like, in Revelation 13:18, it will say some manuscripts, the number is 616, not 666. So what's going on with that? Well, the name Nero Caesar in Latin drops that final noon on Neron right here. And when it drops that, the value is 50, so the new number is 616. The point of this is all manuscript traditions know that it's Nero. It's just whether you're counting from Greek or Latin. Either way, it's Nero. Does that make sense? That accounts for the differences in the manuscripts, that everybody knows this is Nero because ancient people know how to do this. Also in Smyrna is this beautiful church. This is the church that is where the martyrdom of St. Polycarp took place. And so this was not on the tour. We just had a little bit of free time, and we're actually walking down the street, and a Turkish guy stopped us and he said, "American?" We said, "Yes." He said, "Church?" I was like, "Sure." He said, "Right over here." And so we just kind of stumbled into the church of St. Polycarp here. It's beautiful. So who is Polycarp? Look at his dates. He was a bishop in Smyrna for about 45 to 60 years. We don't have a lot of first-hand accounts of things from Polycarp, but his student was Irenaeus, who we do have a lot of stuff by. And Irenaeus tells us that his teacher Polycarp was taught by the apostles. He was a student of John the Apostle, and he had also conversed during his life with many who had seen the Lord themselves or were eyewitnesses. So here's his date. In 156 AD, at the age of 86, he was martyred for his refusal to renounce his faith and sacrifice to the emperor. And so this church is built over the site of his martyrdom. That account of that story is in the martyrdom of St. Polycarp. I'm just going to read this last line. They're trying to get him to revile Christ and swear an oath to the Caesar. And here was his famous reply. For 86 years I have been his servant, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? And then he was martyred. So that's the church that is there at that site. Okay, for the last 5 minutes, I want to convince you to travel to Turkey by answering some other kind of pressing questions you probably have. Food, what's it like being there as a tourist, an American? What's it like being a Christian there? Can you be a Christian and worship openly? Those kinds of questions. So Turkey's beautiful. Took that on my phone. It's a beautiful place. The food was delicious. We had almost every meal you have beef and potatoes. So it really actually didn't feel that different. It was like delicious beef and potatoes. Their money is lira. And so we would go and eat a meal like this, and I needed caffeine, so I'd order a Coke, and you might have a Turkish tea at the end, and they would come and say that the full cost of that meal on the left with a Coke and a tea would be 61 lira, which comes out to about $3. So it's incredibly cheap to travel to Turkey. If you want a cheap family vacation, yes, the plane ticket's expensive, but once you get there, everything is very inexpensive. We had this on the Aegean Sea. I just thought it was cool. We're not eating fish eyeballs every meal, but it was a unique meal that I thought was picture-worthy. Every meal you're going to have Turkish tea is kind of one of their things. Bring it really scalding hot. And they use these unique kind of saucers and glasses. That's distinctively Turkish tea.
Is it sweet?
It's not. You can add a cube of sugar to it, but to me, it just kind of tastes like tea here, non-sweetened tea here. It's not crazy. This was our tour group here. This was Chris Frizzell and Calvin Warpala, two Church Christ preachers from Granbury, Texas. This is Derek McNamara. Those of you that have been here for a number of years, he preached at the Goodman Oaks Church of Christ. And it would have been 2011 or 2012, we did Genesis for our Vacation Bible School, and I had him come teach our adult Bible class. So he taught the adult Bible class here. He's from Ireland, so he has an Irish accent. I don't think you would forget that if you were here. He's now at a church in Texas. So that was the four of us. This was our guide, Mel Tim. She was great. I think people think about green water and beautiful places, and they think maybe Greece. But remember, Greece and Turkey border each other, and the majority of Turkey is bordered by water. It is incredibly beautiful. Like the kinds of things that you would see in Greece, you would also see here in Turkey. The water is green and beautiful. We don't think about this, but in Europe, Turkey is viewed as a vacation destination by a lot of Europeans. There are a lot of people that vacation in Turkey. It's beautiful. This was Istanbul. This was from my hotel room, kind of looking out. Istanbul is a massive, massive city. Here's the Hagia Sophia. The Hagia Sophia was built in 537. Remember all the history? I know you remember all this history, but when the Roman Empire moves from Italy and from Rome, when it moves eastward and they set up in Constantinople, which is modern-day Istanbul, they needed the official state cathedral, the imperial cathedral here, and so that's what the Hagia Sophia is. And it served as a Christian cathedral until the Ottomans took over in the 15th century AD. And then it served as a mosque until 1935. In 1935, it was turned into a museum, and it was just a kind of neutral, come visit here, anybody museum until 2020, when Erdogan's government has been moving pretty right, and so they've got a lot of Muslim, kind of right-leaning politicians. In 2020, they've turned it back into a Muslim mosque. So today, it's a Muslim mosque, but most Turkish people are not happy about that. They think that's like they have politics over there too. And they have politicians that try to curry to people and use religious, right things to do that. But when you go in, it's a mosque, but you still have, like, they've left up this beautiful, this is Mary and Jesus, Mater Theou, this is Mother of God. There's inscriptions here. Beautiful. You can't erase Jesus from this place, no matter how much you try. This is the inside. It's breathtaking. You notice the big circles with the Arabic on it. Behind these would be Christian inscriptions that obviously you can't have that here, so they're covered up. These sheets that hang down kind of decoratively, they're also covering up things up here in the front. Women, if you went to this site or any of the mosques, you'd have to wear a veil. You'd need to take one with you. It's just a scarf that you just need to have kind of covering your hair and your head to be able to go into these sites. You have to take your shoes off when you go in here as well. It's really breathtaking. Some of you wanted to know about what's Christianity in Turkey. You can be a Christian and be in Turkey. You're never under threat. Nobody's going to kill you for being a Christian there or anything like that. You're really not even going to face persecution. Everybody was so nice. Remember my story of the Turkish guy, American church, they're helpful. They're very, very kind. But you cannot, there is a word you would never use, the M word, missionary. You would never want to use that. Because the Turkish government does not want people to come as missionaries. You can't be there as a preacher doing mission work. You can start a church so long as it's a house church and no one knows. You couldn't buy a building and make it into a church. The only buildings that you can use as Christian churches are churches that have been there for a long time. And there's a lot of empty Greek Orthodox churches because there used to be a huge Greek Orthodox Christian population in Turkey until the Greek-Turkish War around World War I. That's when the Turks did genocide on the Armenians, and then they also sent out all of the Greeks. And so the Greeks were expelled in the early 1900s, 1930s. And then Greece and Turkey went to war again in the 1970s over the possession of the island of Cyprus. They were both fighting over Cyprus, and they had a conflict then. And so all the Greeks are not welcome there. And actually, I just noticed today, there's conflict between these two nations right now, because Turkey's doing flights over some of the Greek islands, because Greece has the islands that go right up to Turkey, right up to their border. Patmos, where John was, is right off the shore of Turkey, but it's a Greek island. And so Turkey's flying their stuff over that, and it's making the Greeks mad. So even though they're both NATO nations, they don't like each other. All that to say, you can be a Christian there, and there are other Christian groups that are in those old Greek Orthodox churches. You just can't build a new one. But the thing you can do, this is in Antalya. We visited here, we stopped by, we patroned there to support what they're doing. But you can't start a church, but you can start the St. Paul Cultural Center. And at the St. Paul Cultural Center, we're going to get together and we're going to study these documents that St. Paul wrote, and we're going to talk about him, and we're going to offer classes through the week. And on Sunday mornings, we're going to offer this cultural experience where you come together and you sing some songs that the ancients sang about Jesus, and we're going to take some wine and some bread, and we're going to talk a little bit and have this cultural time to... Do you see what I'm saying? So you can do that. And so this is a Christian... there was a man and woman who went here 30 years ago for work, had to move here. There was no church there. So they started as kind of a mission work, the St. Paul Cultural Center. And this is it. They've got a incredible like patio area back here where they can host seminars. They've got a cafeteria and a coffee house. This is the upstairs. So this is a worship area. They have 4 services on Sunday. They have a Pakistani population, so they have a Farsi worship service. Lots of Russians and Ukrainians there, so they have a Russian service. They have an English service for a lot of the expats. And they also have a Turkish service. There are a few Turkish Christians that are there. So really neat to get to visit that. So
Turkish Christians persecuted?
There's almost no Turkish Christians. There's just almost none of them. Most Christians in Turkey would be Pakistani refugees or Americans or other Christians that are immigrating there.
We have a very large Asian population.
Yeah.
It is in Asia, but
Yeah.
you know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about.
Yep. So the biggest countries that vacation there are Ukraine and Russia. So they're just really messed up right now in Turkey. So, any kind of final thoughts or questions?
You mentioned the Holy Road.
Mm-hmm.
What is the Holy Road in church?
The Holy Road. Did I mention that? What did I say about that?
Well, you were something off of it. You were talking, and I don't even remember what city you were in. And you said this was off of the Holy Road.
I was probably talking about Sardis, and I probably meant to say Royal Road. Sorry about that.
No.
I've been moving my house this week, and I'm exhausted, and it's been very hot outside. So that's the Royal Road is probably what I was talking about. Yeah.
You didn't ask for prayers before, but I want to tell you, I came here when I lost my job. And
Yeah.
I mentioned it, people have prayed.
Yeah.
I am working now.
Great.
And it is a good job. I'm enjoying it. And my son also got a job in Missouri. It's moving, and they're going to go up and get his kids, bring them down, and so they're going to be a whole lot closer. And his wife today got a full-time job remotely to move to Missouri. In Missouri.
Awesome.
She can still do that, so they are relieved, and just God has blessed us all.
Praise God. That's great. Thank you. That's a great way to end the night. Thank you all.
It's not like right. No, he just accepted that job yesterday.